One of the most unsettling experiences that you can have as an adult is realizing that someone that you trusted and loved did not just hurt you. They slowly reshaped your reality while you were too vulnerable to see it. And the scariest part is that this doesn't just happen to naive people, ignorant people. This happens every day to very intelligent and thoughtful people. Welcome back to the Inheritance Podcast. Oh, guys. I just have to, before we jump into today's topic, as you can already kind of tell, I just have to give a big thank you to everybody who listened to my previous episode where I talked about lying and sharing my personal story with my living a lie for so long. It was so well loved, so well received. So many people shared it, and I don't think I've ever experienced such a public embrace of something like that I went through. And so I am so grateful to everybody who took the time to watch that very long episode. That was the longest episode I've ever done before. And so I had worried that because of the length, people wouldn't be able to sit down and give it the time, but no, they did. So to all that watched and shared, thank you. Thank you so much for taking that time to do that. I am so grateful. And because of the impact of that episode, I deeply felt it when I was filming, and I felt it again when I edited it. I kind of wanted to expand upon that topic a little bit and talk about manipulation. And as somebody who lived a lie for 7 years, I did participate in manipulating things. I manipulated what people thought about me. I mean, it is at its core, it's lying. It's a distortion of the truth. It's a distortion of reality. And so I wanted to expand it a little bit more and talk about the psychology of manipulation and identify, if you've experienced this, maybe give you some language for that. Because when it all comes out that we've been manipulated, when it all comes out that somebody that we love and that we deeply respect or we honor is manipulating us, there is a visceral reaction that accompanies that realization. It is horrible. Whether it was a friend, whether it was your spouse, a family member, somebody in authority, a spiritual group, this is for you, and it's to give you language, it's to help you process and to know how to move forward. As I stated earlier, manipulation happens everywhere. I think, just like I had mentioned in my previous episode, there's a lot of big picture things we can kind of point to see, how lying transpires and how it happens all the time, and like big scandals, when the truth comes out and somebody's outed and everybody's like, oh my gosh, how could they do that? How could they live that way? It happens all the time. It happens everywhere. I honestly want to be like, let's just point to the industry of marketing, my industry. Like, it is a little bit of manipulation. It is controlling of a narrative and trying to paint it in a way to get people to buy into something. Same thing with politics, propaganda. That is manipulation. We see it in big ways all the time, but it happens everywhere. Just like I said, with lying, it happens in little Joe Schmo's life. People lie all the time, and it does piggyback off of that self-preservation. Manipulation, however, is kind of a control of a narrative using tactics that we're going to dive into today that point to more of the motive of why do people manipulate. And it's more of like, what am I trying to get out of making sure that this person believes what I'm telling them? Whether it is in marketing, where if I tell you, this product will change your life, whether or not it actually is going to change your life or not, and whether I'm being truthful about that or not, I benefit from you buying into that product. And so it kind of speaks to that motive. And I'm not saying that anybody who does any sort of marketing and markets a product is going at it from that motive. But people who manipulate, it's often more about what they have to gain or what they're trying to protect from losing when they do kind of distort the picture and the reality of whoever it is that they're trying to kind of maintain that image for themselves of using manipulative tactics. And so we're going to dive in today and how this happens. Like I said, this is for you. This is for you who's at home, picking up the kids from school, driving around, doing chores, folding the laundry, washing the dishes, whatever you're doing. This is for you. This is about your life and how it pertains to you. As much as I would love to just jump on the bandwagon and talk about the big picture items, I know that like if it's happening at that scale, it's happening in a smaller scale. This is for you and how it pertains to your life to kind of decipher, am I being manipulated in these smaller scale ways? And how can I deal with that? Or am I being a manipulator? Am I trying to preserve myself for the sake of whatever it is I have to gain from not being outed? We need to know these things about ourselves. We need to walk each other into better, like I discussed in the previous episode. So we're going to talk today about how this pertains to your relationships, however it is that you socialize in life. And we're also going to dive into how this happens, what it looks like, and where to go, and how to heal from it if it has happened to you. I am speaking on this because I have experienced it myself. I spoke in my previous episode about how I spent 7 years of lying. And it is very true. I did manipulate narratives and I did maintain certain things that were not real for the sake of trying to maintain a life that was not healthy. But in that way, I entered into places and spaces with people who did not have my best interest at heart. And I did also experience being manipulated in a relationship. During the 7-year period where I was kind of back and forth, just not living truthfully, hiding parts of myself because I was feeling extremely guilty and full of shame. All of this has to be contextualized within that. In this time, I had been dating somebody that I genuinely thought that I was going to marry this person. It came to a point where we both kind of mutually decided this is not for us. And so it was not like this bad breakup, screamed like I hate you or anything like that. It was a mutual decision, but the pain of what was tied to that relationship ending was something that I was processing. And because I had thought that I was going to marry this person, there was a lot tied to that I was carrying. And when it all kind of ended, even though it was a mutual decision to end that relationship and walk away, it was still extremely painful. There was like futures and realities and things that I was feeling in the wake of walking away from that relationship that kind of put me in a very vulnerable position. And so my story starts there. In that moment of vulnerability, I remember exactly where I was sitting. I remember exactly what I was thinking. I cried and cried and cried, just wondering, am I ever going to find that person that wants to be with me in the context of like the life that I'm wanting? Am I ever going to be fully loved and fully accepted and just desired? And I was just deeply, deeply heartbroken. And in that heartbreak, my heart was just in a really vulnerable position. My mind was processing, trying to separate fact from fiction. If you go through a breakup or like you and a friend have a falling out, or like we said in the previous episode, when it comes to light that somebody's been lying to you, you're kind of in this in-between of trying to pick up the pieces of what's been shattered and move forward. It's not easy. And so that's where I was. It's like dealing with all of that. And in the middle of that vulnerability and in the middle of that mess that I was in, I was kind of living on autopilot. I was sorting through it, but it was still very raw. I was kind of frozen in time and extremely vulnerable. I'm going to make that blatantly obvious. I was extremely vulnerable. And at that time, a longtime friend kind of stepped in with the idea of comforting me, just kind of bringing me some comfort and trying to validate the pain, trying to see where I was and speak to that. When all of that kind of transpired, there was like this offer of like, well, let's just let's talk about it. Let's go get your mind off of it. And I had always been friends with this person. And so it wasn't like weird or anything. But at the same time, I was in a place of, like I said, I was just extremely vulnerable. And so any sort of relational engagement was kind of what I needed at that time. And it just so happened to be this person. The hanging out began to happen more and more. And it just kind of came like my new normal, where I was trying to process the breakup and I was trying to get over it, but I kind of had a distraction at this point. And it allowed me to numb the pain and escape what it was that I needed to process. I needed to sit with, dealing with those core beliefs and dealing with what I was experiencing in the moment of that breakup. Even though it was a mutual decision, I needed to answer the questions that were left in the air. But because this person came and kind of provided a distraction, I just leaned into that. And so all that stuff was kind of left there undealt with, and it was comforting. It was comfortable. And so hanging out with this person became more and more frequent, and I kind of just started to let my guard down. To clarify, this person had always been a longtime friend. I'm going to say that. We were a friend. I had never been romantically interested in this person before. That thought had never really crossed my mind. Like, I had a type, I'll say that, and this person was not that type. After a while, because I was getting comfortable and the frequency was allowing me to just kind of let my guard down, I was starting to feel really seen by this person and known by this person. Eventually, some relational lines started getting blurred and things started happening, to my surprise. But at the same time, it was like, but this is nice. It's nice to be desired. It's nice to be wanted. It's nice not to be pushed aside. It's nice to have somebody validate what I'm going through and in the moment where I needed it. The thing about it was that I thought it was support. I thought it was genuine care and comfort, but it slowly changed and it started to become influence. What do I mean by that? This person, like I said, I had never been romantically interested in this person before, but this person had always had that motivation. And it kind of came to light after the fact, after some lines had been crossed. And when he told me, he was like, oh yeah, I've always kind of wanted this to happen. Always kind of been waiting around for you to like see that I was here or whatever. I thought it was nice because I was wanting that so badly from my ex, because that's how my ex and that breakup made me feel. It made me feel rejected. It didn't make me feel accepted. It didn't make me feel fully desired. And so after the fact, when I was in this situationship with this person and he kind of confessed, like, yeah, I've always wanted this, I thought it was sweet. I thought it was flattering, but I had never been interested. And as a matter of fact, I had even said that to this person prior to all of this kind of transpiring, because I think somebody had kind of gotten wind of it. And so I kind of just established a boundary, not saying like, hey, I'll never be interested or anything, but I was just casually, subtly saying like, oh, you're such a good friend, like a very hard line friend zone this person. With the frequency of our hanging out, he starts sharing more about his perception of people around him. And it was no secret that he didn't have very many friends, and the friends that he did have, it was always kind of dicey. His relationship with some family members was really concerning from like an outsider's point of view. There was not like a level of respect that, looking back, I would have required from somebody that I was in a romantic relationship with. But I kind of overlooked all of that once the relational lines had been blurred and I was emotionally involved. And I started listening to his reasonings behind, why he treated people those certain ways, or why he felt like that was his way of defending himself because, they had been mean or whatever. And I start listening more, and I start kind of giving it some weight, and I start trying to understand his perception. That led to me believing his narrative about those people. Before I had ever been in this particular situationship, I had not had those perceptions of those people. And I tend to be the kind of person that's like, well, when I meet that person for myself, I will make my own judgments. I will discern and come to my own conclusions. And I am that way. And if you've listened to previous episodes of this podcast, you know that I'm a very big proponent of independent thinking. But at the time, I was very malleable in my brain in that way. And so I start kind of adopting his narrative about other people and going into meeting those people for the first time, kind of wearing his lens of that and kind of having preconceived notions about people. It started with his friends. It started with people that I had no idea who they were. And then it bled into our church relationships, people that I had mentioned in my previous episode that I was on staff at my local church at the time. It led into people that I was on staff with. And then I had to kind of, I was trying to see like his point of view and then also reconcile like what I know about these people because I have personal relationships with them. Because so many relational lines had been blurred at this point, I was so emotionally attached to him that I wanted to deeply understand where he was coming from and validate that. And so I did. I started leaning into, well, maybe you're right about this person, even though I had a previous relationship with these people prior to anything with him. And I should be able to come to my own conclusions in that regard. As it started to creep closer into the more intimate levels of friendships and relationships with people in my life, it eventually bled into my own family. I will say this person had a very strong perception of everybody around him except for himself. So you can imagine that even with my own family, with my siblings, with my parents, he had strong opinions about those people, to which he kind of withheld them for a while. And I'm not necessarily saying that this is something that he intentionally did. It did come to the surface what he thought about my family after a while. And you know what? Because so many lines had been crossed, and because I was so emotionally attached, I believed him 100% about my family. And that created such a divide between people that I genuinely love and care about. And I knew better. I'd spent my whole life with these people. And I was like, you know what? You're right. My parents are a little bit like that. Maybe we can have a conversation with them. Maybe you should share those things. Oh, no. They'll never change. Whatever. I had been living a very unhealthy lifestyle that had already kind of created a divide between my parents and I, where I did not trust them with the truth of my lifestyle. And so it made it so much easier to not trust them with anything. It's kind of like a domino effect. I had something that I was deeply ashamed of, that I was hiding from them. I didn't trust them to carry that and to love me in spite of it. And so that divide created a deeper mistrust that sowed the seeds of believing preconceived notions and narratives about my parents, that because there was already so many lies like that I was believing, it was easier to just tack on another lie with it. And it was somebody else's lie. It was their manipulation of the truth. That obviously sowed the seeds for deteriorating the relationships that I had with my family members. It isolated me deeper from them. I was living in my parents' house and I hardly knew my family. I hardly saw them. I was an adult, and so, you could be like, well, you're an adult, blah, blah, blah. I was living at home, okay? I'm not going to throw you this bone. I was living at home. I wasn't paying bills. My parents deserved for me to at least participate in family things, to show them respect and honor, and I wasn't. I did not really, at this stage, I did not really have a relationship with my family. So to say that this entire situationship that I was in deteriorated the relationships between my family is an understatement, for sure. And this was just part of my toxic lifestyle that I was living. But nonetheless, it's true. It started to culminate to where, like I said, first we started with people that I didn't know, then it grew to people that I did know and friends that I had, and then it moved into my family. And before I knew it, it was moving to me. This person that I was romantically involved with started to kind of nitpick me a little bit. And because it had been so normal during the course of the entirety of our relationship, I did not think it was odd. I don't know. I didn't just say like, oh, you're right. But I questioned myself when he started to come at me, just like I questioned everybody else, because I had been practicing that muscle of just believing everything that he had said, because it was out of my vulnerability and my desire to be deeply loved, and where that kind of started. And then how that relationship kind of melded together, it was just normal for me to like fall in line. You might say, well, what did he say about you? Glad you asked. So it started with, little things where he would make jokes about things that I was insecure about. And like I said, we had been friends for a very long time. And so I'm sure in previous conversations where I had said things when we were hanging out as friends, he remembered and would bring it up, insecurities about the symmetry of my face, or insecurities about the way that I did my makeup or my hair or the way that my body kind of looks, because I'm a very tall and lanky person. It's very hard for me to put muscle on. And so I don't really love that about myself. And so because he knew those things, it started as just little harmless jokes, I put that in air quotes, about my insecurities. And so then, because I had made it such a habit of believing what he would say, I really started to sit and chew on those things and question myself and be like, does that make me not attractive? Is that something that you focus on because it's something that I'm insecure about? And it grew to, recommendations on, you should chop your hair off. You should bleach it. Like, that would be so cool. Have you seen this other girl? She has her hair super short and it's bleach blonde. I think you would look really good with that. I know that you used to really work out at the gym. Have you thought about going back? And it slowly gradually, to where it's so subtle, you just don't catch it, started to become not so much as jokes, but more like recommendations of, here's how you should live your life. And it became to the point where he was chipping away at my confidence that I couldn't even just trust myself. And that's how this happens. When someone chips away at your confidence long enough, you stop trusting your instincts. You stop trusting yourself. You stop trusting your intuition. You stop trusting, your own capacity to make judgment calls for yourself. Even though you should be an independent thinker, this is how it happens. This all came to a head. This is so dramatic. But my family kind of had an intervention with me, and they were like, hey, so you need to know the truth, because I think you might be believing a lie. They would have been right. I was wearing rose-colored glasses, and they were like, so here's the deal. And they proceeded to tell me how this had been something that was something that he just does. Not just to me. It wasn't just me, and how he kind of distorted my perception of everybody around him. He does it to everybody. And he had been kind of attacking their insecurities, just like he was doing it to me. He does it to everybody. And it was just this person. It was just how he operated. I am the type of person where you can attack me all day long. I feel like Captain America in that way. I can do this all day. Come on, bring it on. But my self-esteem had been so low and down in the dumps. I vocalized it in therapy at this point where I felt like I was just everybody's doormat, and I was so used to just everybody trampling me. But the one thing that I wouldn't stand for was that if somebody came for someone that I loved, that was like oh no. You can walk on me all day. You can come and throw punches at me all day. But what you're not going to do is you're not going to come from my parents. You're not going to come from my siblings. Just like I said in my previous episode, all of that led to me obviously ending this relationship, which I struggle to call it a relationship. It was. I mean, we were romantically involved, but it was such a weird situation because it was hidden and we couldn't put a label on it. And there was so much it was a situationship. There was nothing about it that felt real. And now that I've had other dating relationships and I'm married now, I just look at it and I'm like, oh, that was for sure a situationship. So, but anyway, I went and I broke this off because I was like, I'm starting to see there's a pattern where this guy was the common denominator, and all of his problems were everybody else's fault. And it wasn't just happening to me. It was happening to people that I loved and cared about. And I woke up. It's like the scales fell off my eyes, and I was like, no. Absolutely not. So I went and I broke it off, and I jumped into therapy, and I started dealing with all of that. And I think the thing that hurt in the wake of that, it wasn't the breakup. I was over it because I was just like, this is not real. So I have no problem ending this relationship, but it hurt to realize the reality of the entire situation. My reality from being with this person had been completely reshaped by their narrative. I had believed things about my best friends. I had believed things about my family. I had believed things about people that I had been doing life with for years that they thought about them. Not what I thought, not my discernment of them, not what I know to be true. I just adopted their narrative. I built walls around my heart to keep those people out because of what he told me, and it just wasn't true. And I had to rectify that. My entire reality shattered on the floor, and I had to pick up the pieces and figure out, what's the truth and what's the lie here? Because it wasn't just my narrative anymore. This was somebody else's narrative that I had to figure out, this isn't mine, and set it down and find the piece of the truth that I had been missing for, I think, well over a year at this point. Like I said, I spent a lot of time in therapy. And I still am in therapy, and I'm still learning about these things. And this was not the only time that I experienced manipulation, but I was able to identify what it looks like, because I decided from that point on, I am going to pay attention to these things and not just go into my relationships on autopilot. I need to be aware of what manipulation looks like and the psychology behind all of it, the signs, the tactics of how somebody might manipulate someone and why, so that I can be proactive in protecting my heart and my mind. And so once I started learning about it all, I realized that my story isn't rare, which brought a level of comfort. So I want you to know you're not alone. I've experienced this too. We're going to dive into the psychology of manipulation together. As I said in my story, and as you can tell, manipulation is not always obvious. I think that there's times where it is. But in most cases, it's not always loud or obvious. Most of the time, it's subtle psychological influence. What it looks like, just as I used in my personal example, is it is a control of the narrative. Say that you see something with someone who has manipulative tendencies, and you say, for instance, say it involves a third party. So-and-so told me that you called them fat. Why would you do that? And then they would back up and say, no, I didn't say that. They're just really insecure about it, and they thought that I said that. It's a little bit of kind of like, maybe we diminish, maybe we change the details, but it's a control of the narrative in order to paint them in a better light, to make sure that you don't see the full truth for what it is. It's dishonesty, it's distortion, just like we've spoken about in my last episode. It looks like the control of that narrative. It also is emotional dependency. If you are the type of person to have codependent tendencies, when you get in friendships, relationships with people or whatever, you just need that person. That is like a red flag. It's a red flag in relationships where you just depend on each other to formulate ideas, to formulate thoughts about things. If you kind of need that person in order to process stuff, if you don't have a circle of advisors or a circle of friends that you can kind of go to, but you typically just go to that one person for everything, which ended up happening with my previous relationship. It was like I had nobody but him. That is a red flag. That's it's very dangerous, because then you isolate yourself from other people. You isolate yourself from other methods and ways of thinking. You isolate yourself from other perceptions. And so it's hard to have any sort of narrative outside of that one person. But now it's emotional, because you kind of depend on them for any source of validation, for feeling seen, for feeling loved and accepted. Just like in that moment when I was vulnerable, when that relationship started, I needed to feel accepted. That was not the right kind of accepted that I needed. But nonetheless, that's how it happens. Another one is the slow erosion of confidence. So just like I said about how, it started with my confidence in how I saw other people based on his perceptions of them. And when he would share and say, no, that person is actually horrible, you shouldn't trust them. Or I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, just an example. In my personal relationship, when he would tell me, what you actually think of that person is not true, based off of my experience, this is how they are, and I just know it. It eroded my confidence in my ability to trust my own instincts, but then it just slowly crept closer and closer and closer until it got to me, until I couldn't even trust, the way that I did my makeup, or the way that I like to have my hair done, or what I chose to wear. It gets closer and closer and closer until there's absolutely no confidence in anything that you do as an independent person, or anything that you think as an independent person. And these are very, very, very dangerous. And they're huge red flags if you are seeing these types of things happen in somebody that you're watching from an outsider's point of view. This is kind of how it happens. And so you want to be mindful of these types of things. So psychologically speaking, research suggests high control groups and cult environments use the same psychological patterns seen in manipulative relationships. It's not weird and it's very common. I feel like the word cult is such a buzzword right now. I mean, in some cases, rightfully so. I'm just going to say that. But nonetheless, the same psychology that pulls people into cults can exist inside everyday relationships. So they're the same. So you might ask yourself, like, how do people join cults? Well, I would ask you, how did you get into a manipulative friendship there? It's the same thing. And it's so easy to look at people who in group settings fall into that and they come out and they're like, yeah, I was in a cult. And you would think, like, how do smart people do this? Like, did you not see the signs? And it happens all too often in a one-on-one setting with people. It happened to me. And I don't want to like toot my own horn, but I don't think I'm a freaking idiot. I was extremely vulnerable. I was looking to have a need met. I was needing something from a relationship that turned into something else because I was emotionally vulnerable. And it happens all of the time. So how does manipulation actually work? Before I say anything else, manipulation is a form of abuse. A lot of people who manipulate and who have manipulative tendencies may not realize that they're doing it because a lot of people who manipulate come from places of trauma. They come from unhealthy environments where they grow up and they don't know how to communicate without trying to get something from somebody. Manipulation is a transactional thing. It is a way to protect themselves. Just like we talked about in the previous episode about how lying is a way to self-preserve our image for the sake of what it is that we can lose. Manipulation is this, it's like the twin sister of that. And it is abuse, especially when it's used in environments where there's a power dynamic, where there's a leader who's trying to make sure that the people who are below them don't find out certain things for the sake of their power, their influence, the money that they could lose, whatever. Because when the fallout happens, there's nothing to say other than that it's trauma. Like, you're causing trauma in people. It is extremely traumatic to walk out of manipulative situations because it can get very aggressive. Not all manipulative relationships, whether it's interpersonal or it's something like a group setting, are dangerous, but there are instances where manipulation can turn into something more. It can turn into domestic violence, where we first are using verbal ways to control people, and then we use physical methods. And that is why it's very, very important for us to have this conversation about manipulation, is because the manipulator does not know how to communicate in a way that doesn't make them pay the cost for something. They are trying to get something out of controlling the narrative. And really and truly, the heart of manipulation is control. They're trying to control you because they are afraid of not being able to control you and what that would become. That's not excusing manipulation, and it's not excusing the manipulator because they've experienced trauma in their life. Like, they need to go get help. But nonetheless, we need to call this as it is. So with that, we're going to move forward. So we're going to talk about the common manipulation tactics. So if you're somebody who's listening to this podcast and you're like, oh, this is well and good, how do I identify if somebody's trying to manipulate me? Buckle up, buttercup. We're going to dive right in. Manipulation usually shows up in patterns. I'll try and use my own personal examples for this, but hopefully something will come to mind as we chat here. The first manipulation tactic is gaslighting. Another buzzword right now. A lot of people are talking about it because it's very common. Gaslighting makes you question your memory, your perception, and eventually your own sanity. And boy, have I been here. Oh my God, every time I get gaslit and I found out, I'm like, I freaking knew it. And it drives you crazy. Here's how it plays out. Say that you find something out about your friend, you go to confront them and you're like, hey, why did you say that? Why did you do that? And they just flat out say, that's not what happened. Even though you have a source telling you that's what happened, or maybe you witnessed it for yourself. And they just completely just flat out say, no, that's not what happened. You're remembering it wrong. The way that gaslighting works is it kind of turns the table and it flips it on the person who might be the victim of whatever happened. And the manipulator will put it on them and say, well, you're being too sensitive. Like it wasn't like that. And we just flat out dismiss what happens and we make it about the person that's being lied to and manipulated. And we make it somehow on their memory. We make it somehow on their emotions and how they received it. We make it on their perception of actually what transpired rather than just owning it. And boy, it makes me mad because all that it does is it controls the situation. It preserves the person who is the offender and it protects them. Like I said, manipulation is transactional. It's about the other person getting what they want out of that relationship, whatever it may be. It's extremely selfish, but it is nonetheless like that's how gaslighting happens. You basically see something, witness something, third party, somebody comes to you, you go to confront the situation. That is not what happened. Here's what actually happened, and it's a complete fabrication. Or it's a distortion of it, we diminish it, and we say, no. You're seeing stuff. I don't know how you got that. When the person that's being confronted knows full well that they are lying. I will say though, however, there are some manipulators who literally have lied so long to themselves, they don't even know fact from fiction. That's a whole other episode. We're not going to dive into that one. Another tactic is projection. I've experienced this one personally as well. Projection flips the script. The person causing the harm becomes the accuser. This is also another buzzword because projection is basically whatever the person that is making the accusation of like, oh, are you being unfaithful? They're being unfaithful. And they're putting that on you. They're kind of telling on themselves in a way. And it's out of their own insecurity. It's out of their own fear of being found out or whatever it is, say that they're gambling on the side and they don't want to be found out. And they make some sort of financial accusation to their partner about spending too much money. That's them projecting, even though the accusation most of the time when it comes to projection is completely not true. A great example, me and my husband all the time, like I have, as I said, I have an anxious attachment style. I'm in therapy, guys, chill out. And I will, in my fear of rejection from him, if we're dealing with something in my fear of abandonment or whatever, I will say, does that make you think less of me? Do you think that I'm a bad person now or whatever? And I'm kind of projecting onto him because I'm taking the way that I see myself and how I kind of deal with my attachment and my fear of being rejected. And I'm putting it on him like, oh, you're just going to reject me now. Or, oh, you're just going to think less of me now. And every time he's like, no, that's not true at all. It's a great example of projection. Another one, oh gosh, guys, I've been in so many toxic relationships. Another great example for me before I met my husband. This was not my husband. My husband's great. I was in a relationship with somebody who, it was so funny because I was so young and naive. I'm not a private person at all. I will leave my phone laying around. I'll leave my computer laying around. Like I have nothing to hide. And so in this relationship, I was very much like that. And so I would get up, we'd go out to dinner or he'd be hanging out at the house or whatever. And I'd leave my phone kind of laying around and I would go to the restroom or I'd go outside for a minute and come back in. And this happened so many times and I'm kind of like shocked that I put up with this, but I would come back into the room and he'd be looking through my phone, which like I have nothing to hide. So it's not that big of a deal, but I would sit down. At the time I was in college, I was doing group projects with people. I was serving at my church. Like I interacted with quite a few individuals of the opposite sex, but it was all innocent. And he would go through my phone. I'd come sit back down and he would be like, who's Tim? Just like a really vague question. I'd be like, what? What do you mean, Tim? What are you talking about? He's like, you have a private thread with Tim. Who is he? How do you know him? And it was like he was digging for something that he was perceiving was there. I've always been a faithful person. I have never cheated on a partner at all. And so I think he was kind of projecting that I was being unfaithful. And this happened all the time. I remember there was one instance where we were serving at our church and I was talking with one of the youth students. I was serving in our youth group, and he drove me home from youth and just broke down crying because he was feeling like I was being too flirtatious when I was just laughing with this person, having a very candid conversation. All of it came out that in his previous relationship, he had been cheated on. And so he was just deeply afraid of getting left in that way. And I mean, like, sure, maybe that's a real fear for you, but I had given him no inclination that I was being unfaithful. Nonetheless, every time I would leave my phone behind, he would check my phone. And there were multiple instances where I had just one-on-one text conversations with somebody from school that I was doing a group project with, or somebody that I needed to just shoot some information to, and then there would be some sort of like, oh, ha, 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 joke, whatever. He would read into that and then project it onto me. And it was exhausting. It's exhausting. And I guarantee you, every time I do this to my husband, where I'm like, well, you probably just think I'm a horrible person now, I'm projecting my own insecurities and my self-perception that's very broken onto him. And he's like, not at all. And I need to see that as I'm projecting that onto him. It'll take on a bunch of different faces. Some people just project their own insecurities, but a lot of people in manipulative relationships will project what they're doing onto the person. They accuse them of what, they're hiding, or their dishonesty, or whatever it is that they don't want their partner to find out. Another one is going to be the self-esteem erosion. Kind of talked about this one already in an example, but nonetheless, let's just talk about it for a second. One of the most effective ways to control someone is to slowly destroy their confidence. So a lot of manipulation will lead to people questioning pretty much everything about like the way that they think, the way that they act, the way that they do anything. But it starts with the slow erosion of their own self-confidence. An example, like I said, in my personal story, was kind of making jokes about my insecurities and kind of making me question those things about myself, along with criticizing people's appearances, undermining their intelligence or their decisions. When the difference between the person that I am now versus the person that I was in this manipulative and controlling relationship was, in that relationship, none of what I thought or believed about myself, I independently championed. So if I wanted to change my hair, if I wanted to, go shopping, or if I wanted to do something else, it kind of came with the approval of this person. I wasn't the type to be like, no, I want to do this for me and screw you if you don't like it. I am that way now. My husband makes jokes all of the time about how, like, I tell him stories about the person that I was in this relationship, and he's like, what? Because he knows full well, he can tell me, that is a weird outfit that you're wearing, and be like, okay, that's your opinion. I love to think independently now. And it's an exercise of my own right that I did not have, and I was not exercising in these controlling relationships. And I enjoy it so much now. I'm very confident in my decisions because they're mine to make. If I want my hair a certain way, I'm going to do it because I like it. In the opposite way, in manipulative relationships, all of this is undermined and eroded so that you will kind of trust the person that is manipulating you more than you trust yourself. They win in that way so that you don't think of your own. You don't act of your own. And therefore your life is not yours, it's theirs. And they kind of control that. Another one is going to be intermittent reinforcement. So inconsistent affection creates emotional addiction. What does that mean? So basically how it looks is that it's a pattern of getting the affection that you're looking for. And a lot of this is going to happen more so in interpersonal relationships, mostly romantic relationships, sometimes friends. Maybe it'll happen in group settings where you get the affection that you're looking for, whether it's the approval, the championing, or the you're so beautiful, I'm so glad I found you, I'm so lucky, whatever. And then there's the withdrawal. It's kind of like weird and sudden, and they're cold and they're not consistent in that way. And sometimes they will blame you for the withdrawal. And so then you'll try to fix it in some way to get that affection back. So it's this like back and forth dance that you do where you're kind of trying to regain what you had with the affection that you're craving. And like I said, this can happen in friendships. This can happen in group settings. But whatever it is that you're looking for, when they give it and then they withdraw, and the reason for the withdrawal is sometimes, oh, well, you're just not doing what I need you to do. In some way, like somehow it's your fault. And so you chase them down in order to fix it or remedy it so that you can get the affection again. This is so sad because it's just taking advantage of the everyday need of people and how they need human understanding and affection, validation, the relationships that we all deeply crave. Is taking advantage of that because relationships should not be transactional. Somebody who is making you give to them as a way to reward you with affection, that's not how this gets to work. What this causes in a lot of people, especially people who have anxious attachment styles, what it causes is a chasing, like a cycle where that person will continue to try and please the person who's withdrawing the affection and withholding the affection to get what they crave, to get the affection that they crave, to get the partnership, to get the time, the acknowledgement, whatever it is. It's a constant pattern of chasing that person and trying to fix it themselves rather than the person who's withdrawing dealing with, why am I withdrawing? Why do I feel the need to not share? Why do I feel the need to not be vulnerable? Why do I feel the need to not give of myself? It causes the other person to just reinforce that pattern, and it becomes addictive because when they finally do give you that affection, it's like, I hate to say that it's like a drug kind of, but it is, because somebody like me who has an anxious attachment style, when I fix something and then I get what I'm craving, it almost reinforces the idea that like, I know what I'm doing. I know that I can fix this. I know the answers to all of the mysteries of the universe, and I don't. I cannot make somebody willingly give me affection by believing that I can just fix them. Like I said, my therapist is like, you gotta quit believing you can just get up in there and give everybody a tune-up. It does not work that way, and it doesn't. I cannot control people. I can give of my own heart, out of the overflow of the love that I have for myself, but I cannot buy or win somebody's approval or their affection for me. But people who often have anxious attachment styles, or people who really, really, really are lonely and crave that, will fall in this trap where when they finally get that affection, it feels so rewarding that they have no problem repeating the cycle. But it is exhausting. It's exhausting. It drains you. So anyway, let's move on. Another manipulation tactic is going to be love bombing. This is another buzzword, so let's break it down. Sometimes manipulation starts with overwhelming kindness. And I'm not going to use romantic terminology for this because this crap happens everywhere. It happens in friendships. It happens in group settings. It happens all of the time. Like, love bombing is just kindness. So what it normally will start as is intense attention, quick emotional attachment. I feel like in romantic settings or in like one-on-one friendships and stuff, you go from being like strangers with this person or strangers in this setting to like sharing everything about your life story, or sharing, like just becoming like so quickly embedded with these people and interwoven with these people than you normally would, like in any other situation. So they might ask like really personal questions that you wouldn't otherwise share. Lines in my particular situation, lines that never would have been crossed got crossed really fast because I was extremely vulnerable, and they were kind of bombing me with all of the affection and the attention that I really was craving because I had felt deeply rejected in that moment. But all of it leads to later withdrawal. So it's just a facade, is what I'm trying to say. I think that there is a healthy pace for relationships, friendships, even in group settings. There's definitely a healthy pace, and then there's the unhealthy pace where it's just love bombing. I would really encourage you, if you're feeling like you're falling into any of these traps, to do a deeper dive into them, because I don't have the time to go into each and every one of them. But if you do feel like you started a relationship really, really quickly, and you might be in this love bombing stage, or it was this, and a lot of love bombing can be like early promises that can't be kept, that later when you become really close to this person and you're interwoven, you're already super emotionally attached, they fail to keep those promises. They fail to meet the standard. They don't have the character or the integrity to live up to what they promised. That's also love bombing. So like I said, this can play out in a bunch of different ways. So if you feel like you are a victim of any of these tactics, I would encourage you to dive deeper into them, maybe reevaluate your relationship with these people. These are all very dangerous. That's all I'm trying to say. The final tactic we're going to talk about is triangulation. What it is it creates division so the manipulator stays in control. So triangulation essentially is you and the manipulator have a problem, and they bring in a third party to reinforce their narrative. And it kind of is like a ganging up on you a little bit, or like pushing you into a corner, using another person to like reinforce whatever it is that they're saying, to kind of, it kind of makes you like feel powerless in a way, to where you will kind of jump sooner to the conclusion of like, well, maybe I really am in the wrong, or maybe I don't have all of the pieces of the puzzle here, or maybe I should just go with the flow, try to keep the peace, whatever that looks like. It'll pit people against each other. It just creates, it's so dividing, and it creates so much division, and it controls narratives between groups. So it's not always just three people. It can be, here's the controlling party, here is the other party that maybe you're kind of like a part of, the questioning party, and then the controlling party will bring in a third party that reinforces their narrative, so you stop being part of the questioning party. Again, like I said, manipulation takes place in cults. It takes place in high control environments where the people who are using manipulative tactics have something to lose if you were to exit that relationship, or if you were to question that relationship. And so they will use these tactics in group settings. And so it's very important for you to pay attention. With all of that in mind, how is it that very smart people fall into manipulative systems or relationships? How is it that something that seemed so good in a romantic relationship turned into something so bad with someone who's extremely smart, with someone who's very intelligent? I'm going to tell you, it doesn't matter if you're smart or not. It doesn't matter like where you fall on the intelligence scale. There are a lot of people who are more susceptible to these types of relationships. However, I do think that vulnerability is a huge open door for being manipulated. And it doesn't always mean that somebody who exits, and has a really heartbreaking breakup, or they lose a loved one or whatever, will mean that you're going to walk into a manipulative relationship. But a lot of people, like I said in my previous episode, deeply want to connect with each other. Like we want to have human connection to where our hearts can be known and where we can be deeply understood by another human being. We want to be validated. We want to be accepted. We crave that kind of affection. If there are significant wounds, or if there are kind of holes in our heart that we crave it a little bit more, we kind of will overlook some things. We might turn a blind eye to a red flag. A lot of people who have never experienced manipulation might fall into this trap, but oftentimes there are people who are kind of craving it so much, they might be very desperate for this kind of connection, that they will not see the signs until it's too late. And then exiting those relationships or exiting that group becomes increasingly difficult, because things do change after the manipulation kind of reveals itself. But nonetheless, let's talk about it. So like I said, emotional pain can be kind of something that you should be wary of. If you have lost somebody, if you are grieving in any way, if you've gone through a heartbreak, like, be mindful of the fact that your heart is vulnerable. Your mind is vulnerable. Oftentimes when we're grieving, especially in the early stages of grief, or we're just extremely lonely, we might be depressed, we might be having bouts of anxiety, it's very hard to think clearly. It's very hard to see things as they are, and that's not always the case. A lot of people can deal with that very well, but often the emotional pain, whatever that is, whether it's you're experiencing depression, you're extremely lonely, you've maybe not had very much luck in the dating game, or maybe you had a great relationship like mine and it fell apart and you're dealing with that, or you've lost a loved one, you are experiencing infidelity in your marriage, or you find out that somebody that you thought you knew wasn't who they are, and you're now walking that out, just like I had talked about in our previous episode. When you find out somebody is lying, it does create a lot of shock. Whatever that emotional pain may be, you have to be very wary of your emotional state and the vulnerability that you're in. Otherwise, this can be an open door for these kinds of relationships. Like I said, loneliness, seeking belonging, I think all of these are generally good. Like, I think it's good to want to belong. I think it's good to want to have community. I don't think that we should do life alone. I think we need to be careful about how our desires can turn into desperation. It creates an open door where that desperation can lead the way and we can overlook these things. Another one is going to be trusting authority. This is hard because I think, like I said, with current events and things coming out, authority is being questioned. A lot of people do not trust the government. We do not trust the media. And these are means that all of us kind of can experience manipulation. The media is heavily biased. The government and each administration that is in play, they have their own agendas in mind. And so when you contextualize that into interpersonal relationships in one-on-one settings or group settings, oftentimes people do have their own agendas. They have their own bias. And you have to kind of take that into consideration. And people who are just naturally trusting, people who naturally take others at their word, specifically authority, are going to be the types of people who will fall prey to being manipulated. And I'm not trying to say that every person that's in authority is not trustworthy. However, we have to be able to think independently. We can't just say, well, they're in authority, they know what they're doing. No. Very corrupt people end up in places of power. And that we have to be able to see the wrong. We have to be able to call it out. We need to hold each other accountable. Just like I said in the previous episode, the world will only heal when we walk each other out and let honesty and vulnerability and transparency lead the way. And that can only happen if we're allowing ourselves to see things factually. To not just say that, oh, well, he says that he's not laundering money. He says that person lied about that, but there's other people who can back up that allegation. But I'm just going to trust him because he's authority. He is in a position of authority, and that's my job. Guys, I'm just going to say, anybody who is in a position of leadership that is just trusted because they are the person that's leading the way. Like, guys, let's look at Charles Manson. Can we please? Just because somebody is leading a group of people doesn't mean that they are qualified to do so. Doesn't mean that we should just trust them because they look like a leader or because they talk like one or because they are in a position of authority. We need to be able to think independently. So all that to say, if this is happening to you, it doesn't make you an idiot. It doesn't make you stupid. But we do have to be weary of what am I thinking? What am I needing from this relationship that I can't get somewhere else? Why is that? Am I just really lonely? Do I need to just try and go and pursue some other friendships outside of this one? Do I have codependent tendencies? Am I extremely depressed and I really need to deal with that? Am I just needing to feel like I belong somewhere? And this isn't necessarily the environment that's really curing that feeling of belonging. It just kind of scratched that itch in the beginning and it's feeling a little bit controlling now. I can still belong somewhere. It just doesn't mean I need to belong here. We have to be able to do that. I feel like I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here with trying to remedy all of these things. But if you are the type of person to desire this stuff, or you have these tendencies where you tend to be on the lonely side, or you tend to want to belong somewhere, or you might be in the middle of grieving something, or you tend to trust authority, you might find yourself in a position where you are being manipulated by somebody, whether it's a one-on-one situation or it's a group setting or it's at church. Like, manipulation is just one kind of facet of abuse that we're kind of discussing right now, but it is abuse. And that's why it causes trauma. And I feel like a lot of people are going to kind of put a wall up when I'm saying these things, especially if you are somebody who might be in a situation where you are being manipulated. You're going to want to defend your position. And I get that. I do get that. I'm just letting you know that when it all comes to light, it's going to be very traumatizing, because manipulation is abuse. It's abuse of you, and we can't justify it. But we also need to be aware of ourselves, figure out like when it all does come out and we're like, well, how the heck did this happen? I'm not dumb. Am I? No, you're not. These are just things you might struggle with, things you might want. Like I said, we have to be weary of when our desires turn into desperation. So with that in mind, I want to ask you a couple questions. So wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, maybe just like try to pause. If you're driving, obviously you can't like pull over and stop the car, but just like quiet your mind. I want you to ask yourself these questions. Do I feel confused after conversations with this person or this group? Do I constantly question my memory? Like when I have a conversation with them, it leads to me wondering if I remembered that right. Maybe I didn't remember it right. Maybe I forgot some details and that's why it's fuzzy. Do I feel responsible for somebody else's emotions? Like, oh, well, they feel that way because of this. Well, oh, they said that because you did this. They do that because I need to do better. I need to be better at communicating. Do I take responsibility? Do I defend what they do and justify it? Do I feel the need to defend their position? Do I feel the need to defend their behavior? Do I feel like I've lost trust in my own instincts? Like maybe they just know better than I do. Maybe they're smarter than me, and I should listen to that. Maybe they just have a better relationship with God than I do. Maybe I would look better if I lost some weight. Maybe I would look better if I cut my hair off, even though I kind of don't want to. Do I find myself defending this relationship to other people who question it? Maybe you've had people point out some inconsistencies. You have to constantly justify it. Maybe it's more than one person that's seeing something about this relationship, but you're the only one defending it. They're not defending it. It's just you. Do I constantly find myself defending this relationship to other people? Healthy relationships may challenge you. They should never make you abandon your sense of reality. You should be able to hold two things in a healthy relationship. You should be able to hold your independence, your own way of thinking, your ability to discern what's best for you, and still be friends with somebody. Still be in a relationship with them. I've said in a multitude of episodes that my husband and I do not always agree on everything. Does that mean that we can't be married? No, not at all. We are figuring out, the longer that we're married, what becoming one looks like. But in the way of, in particular with my marriage, as we become one, I don't just abandon myself. I don't just say, you know what, let's just do what you want to do. Let's just believe what you want to believe. Let's act and talk the way that you want to talk. No, my husband married me as I am, just as I married him as he is. And the only change that I ask of my husband over time is that he becomes the better version of himself, however that looks. I don't ask him to become my version of his better. I don't ask him to become me. No, I can be independent. I can process and discern things for myself, and I can still love somebody and be intimately involved with them. I can still be a part of a church and think independently. I can still have a best friend and think independently. I can disagree with my family members and think independently. Like I can love my family and we not agree on everything and still have all of who I am. You should not be laying your entire reality and your own ways of thinking on the altar of this relationship. I don't think that that's healthy. And if you're in a position where you feel like you're doing that, you're having to do that, you can't question things, you can't look at stuff from a different angle and assess and ascertain if there is something going on that isn't what you're being told by the person who's kind of controlling the narrative, that might be the manipulator. If you can't do that, if you don't have the freedom to do that, then I'm sorry, you are being manipulated. You don't have your own ways of independent thinking. And I urge you and I implore you to regain those things and understand that a healthy relationship does not require you to abandon who you are. They champion who you are. And on another note, like before we move on, I just feel like this needs to be said. If you are feeling fear about this relationship, you know, the one that you're having to defend and all that stuff. If there's any sort of fear of like trying to regain your independence, because I feel like a lot of people who think they might be honoring, they think that they might be submissive, that cannot look at another angle of the person that they claim to love and trust and honor and blah, blah, blah. If they cannot call it out, because you can do stuff in love. I can call out inconsistencies in my life and people that I care about in their lives. I can call it out in love. I don't have to be mean, but if I feel like I can't because I'm afraid of what they're going to say or what it's going to say about me, or if I'm going to step out of line or whatever, I just don't think that that's a healthy relationship. We have to be able to be real. Number one, God, like we have to be able to be real with people and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. I don't know if it's true. I'd like to know. And walk that out. And if you feel like in that moment when you're exercising that honesty and that vulnerability and transparency with somebody that they're still not being forthcoming with you, I understand there's an element of like, well, crap, now what do I do? And the fear that that brings, I get the very real fear of a friendship coming to an end, a relationship coming to an end. But I don't think that we should not walk out real relationships with people and being honest and being confident to be honest with people and to have very real conversations in love. You can do it in love. You don't have to be mean. But if you feel like you can't speak up in a relationship because they're going to lash out at you or they're going to call you names, unfaithful, dishonoring, they're going to call you a traitor, I don't know what they're going to call you. But if it boils down to that, that's not a real relationship. You don't have a relationship with that person. If you fear a real conversation, they're a human being at the end of the day. Whatever position they have in your life, that is a human being. They are finite, just like you. There is no like hierarchy. And I do understand when it comes to work, when it comes to positions of leadership and all that stuff, we do have to be honoring. And like I said, we can have honoring conversations where we double check and make sure that people are walking in integrity and transparency in a way that they should, but we should not be afraid to do that. And if you are, that's a problem. So I'm just going to leave that there. We're going to continue on because there are people who are probably going to recognize those things about them and they are going to ask these questions and be like, well, crap, now what do I do? What ends up happening in situations where we see the light of day? And we realize, okay, I'm being manipulated. This is not true. Multiple people have come to me and told me the truth, and now I see it. I'm seeing the patterns. I need to confront it. You can confront it, and you can do whatever means necessary to move forward with that. The truth is very threatening to manipulators because they realize that all of these transactions that they've done in order to gain something from their control of the narrative is going to cost them either the relationship, it's going to cost them the business. It's going to cost them a group. It's going to, I don't know. It's going to cost them something. So it's very threatening. And so what will end up happening in some cases when you confront it and when you see the light of day is that manipulators will escalate when you see the truth. So the moment that you start seeing clearly, the manipulation will often intensify. I did confront the guy that I said was going through my phone. After a while, I kind of got tired of it. And I was just like, is this normal? I had never had a dating relationship where somebody had gone through my phone all the time. And before this guy, I had only dated one person. And so I was a little bit naive in that way. But I just was like, I'm not sure that this is normal. kind of like how he dealt with my questioning of it was just a flat out denial. And unfortunately, I didn't talk to anybody about this when I was in this situation. That was another part of my ignorance. So I kind of, at first I believed him, but he was just like, no, of course it's normal. Like everybody does this. And then there was a little bit of blame shifting when it came to the projection, where as I was trying to just like figure out what was going on and why he felt the need to do that in the first place, because he would outright accuse me of things that just weren't true out of his own fear of abandonment. When I went to confront it, it was just more like he just intensified and was like, I've been hurt by other people, and it was everybody else's fault that he was doing what he was doing. It is true that he was probably hurt when his previous relationship was stepping out on him. And I'm not invalidating that. However, how he was acting towards me and projecting all of this onto me when I went to go have a conversation about it, it somehow became my fault, her fault, everybody else's fault. He has trust issues. And there was no ownership, and it just kind of intensified. And he kind of was an emotional person. And so then we add the emotional element of it. And then there were the character attacks where it was like, well, I just don't know that I can trust you. And I was like, what have I done to make you feel like you can't trust me? I have never stepped out. I have never made any mention of being attracted to somebody else. There was always this conversation when I would confront it about how he felt like I was being unfaithful, and I was having all these secret conversations and all this stuff when I had never had that character. And so these similar things will happen if you confront somebody who has been manipulating you and you're starting to see the light of the day, or you are seeing the light of day, and you confront it. It's going to escalate because there is a huge threat to the narrative and the control that this person has had. And so it might intensify. And so I'm saying fair warning. These are similar things you might experience if you confront whoever it is that's not being truthful with you, or who's manipulating the narrative, whether it's about you or about someone else or about a group that's like trying to call out this toxic behavior or this toxic relationship. And they're waving the red flags of like, hey, this is not healthy. And then you finally see the light of day, and you kind of believe the truth tellers, the ones who have been demonized on the outside, trying to call out the toxic relationship, the group, the church, the authority, whatever it may be. You finally start to see that, and then you go and confront them. You're probably going to be met with denial, blame shifting, character attacks, and rewriting history. And everything is going to be back on the people that either you're believing, the narrative you're believing, or it's going to be back on you. Oh, well, you should know about their past. Did you know that they did this? And it may or may not be true, but does that make that what they're doing okay? No. Does that mean that you should just lay down and continue on in a manipulative relationship because they might have a fact about this other person that's trying to tell you the truth about this? Guys, my past is splotchy. It's spotted. It's not great. However, I don't understand this particular example, why manipulators will take the high ground and be like, well, did you know about them? And it somehow invalidates the truth teller because they have a spotty past. I have a spotty past. I'm a truth teller. Does that mean that you shouldn't believe the truth? Just because somebody doesn't have a past that is perfect. Nobody's perfect. We're all trying to work out our crap. We're all trying to overcome. Nobody is going to be able to point to a wrongdoing from a position of perfection. That doesn't mean that the truth that they're telling you doesn't exist, because it sure might. It might be there. This person might be totally manipulating you. And when you go and confront them, they're going to try and point it somewhere else off of themselves. And you need to be ready for that. All they're trying to do is control, because control depends on maintaining the narrative. And like I said, going back to the psychology of manipulation, it all stems from a need to control. A lot of people who become manipulators come from environments where they had no control. And so they don't know how to have relationships with people on honesty and transparency. And they don't know how to have relationships that are not transactional. They don't understand that a loss of a relationship shouldn't be threatening. And I'm not saying that justifies what they're doing. It just helps you understand what's going on up here when they start to escalate. They're seeing it as a threat. They're going to lose you. And they should. They should. They don't deserve you if they've been lying, if they've been deceitful, and they're not going to own it. That's my caveat. If they don't want to reconcile, if they're not going to walk out reconciliation, yes, they should lose you. You need to exit that. You need to leave. Keep all that in mind. Like, it's not always going to be you confront them and they own it and it's great. Because a lot of people who get to the point of manipulating, where they manipulate multiple people, this has been going on for a very long time. It's not going to be unlearned and owned, and people are not just going to jump to taking accountability. They might double down and they might reinforce. And so that will leave you with a decision to make in that moment of what you're going to believe and what you're going to do. Often, and what should happen, you exit that relationship, you exit that friendship, you leave that group. There's going to be a process now that you're going to walk out. And so I want to let you know the 4 stages after discovering manipulation. The first one is going to be shock, and it feels like a freaking bullet. And you're going to say, was any of it real? Did they love me? Did they mean anything that they said? What does that say about me? Am I worthy of that kind of affection? If it wasn't real, like, it's shock. And as you're processing that and you're asking those questions, it might turn into anger, because then you realize, like, even if it was real, I didn't deserve that. You get angry at them. But then you think, how could I have subjected myself to something like that for so long? Then you get angry at yourself. Probably after that, it'll turn into grief. Grieving the relationship that you thought existed. And by the time I had entered into therapy after I broke off this very manipulative relationship, this was the stage that I was in. I think I had seen the signs of manipulation, and I had not ended the relationship before I had found out about, the hurt that he was causing to people I cared about. Because I genuinely did care about him, and I wanted better for him. And I was in that relationship because of the love that I had for this person. But what helped me get over the hump of dragging my feet was being able to have that anger. I genuinely did think that there were parts of that relationship that were kind of what I was looking for. I would say, like, most of that relationship was bad. That's why it was a situationship, not a relationship. And so I grieved that. And even in the friendship was really kind of what I was mostly grieving, because it was gone. That is kind of what I dealt with in therapy, was grieving what I lost, and then grieving what I thought I had. Because I genuinely did want a healthy romantic relationship. I wanted a healthy romantic partner, and that's not what he was. And I had thought in that moment when I was being deceived that I wasn't a healthy relationship. I needed to grieve the reality of it. I finally got to have clarity after that. And that's where I started to rebuild the trust in myself. And that this is kind of the final stage, but I will say that I feel like this process will rinse and repeat. And you may not do it in order. Like, I kind of, how I've said in other episodes, like, grief is not linear. I don't think this process is going to be linear. There's been many times in my life where I've experienced manipulation, where I've seen the truth, and it plays out differently. It's not always the same, but I will say it does end in a place of clarity, and it doesn't always just, like, you don't just go through the process once and then you're done. But I will say the part of rebuilding trust in yourself, when you reach this point of clarity, it's crucial, because when I ended this romantic relationship, I couldn't trust myself because I hadn't been trusting myself. I hadn't trusted my judgment at all in this relationship. And then when I realized that I had given all of my trust to this person to make all of the decisions about every facet of my life, my friends, what I did with my hair and my fashion, what music I listened to, you name it. I hadn't trusted myself. I hadn't been exercising that. I had delegated those things to a third party to then question How could I let myself do this? How could I let myself be in this relationship? And how can I trust myself to make a good decision going forward? I had to wrestle all of that out until I finally saw this for what it was and how I got there, and all of the steps that it took for me to start delegating more and more and more and more of my own independent thinking and processing. I had to process all that in order to have clarity. Just know, if this is something that you are going to walk out and deal with, give yourself time, give yourself grace. Understand that it's not going to be something that you just walk away from and overnight you're okay. It's painful. It's very painful in any scenario because we desire to be loved and accepted by people genuinely. We desire to belong. We desire to be known. When we realize that the people that we have pursued in that desire to be known and loved and accepted and understood and all those things, that they didn't have our best interest at heart, that they didn't care like they should have, that they didn't give to the level that we gave, that we laid ourselves down on the altar of pleasing them and getting that affection that we desire, it's heartbreaking and it's earth-shattering. But that desire to be known and that desire to be loved and accepted is universal. We all want it, and we all can fall into a trap where we enter into relationships with people who don't have the capacity to love us in the way that we deserve, or they just don't want to. I can't really speak for every manipulator. I think that there are people out there who do want healthy love, but they don't have healthy tools. But I think a lot of people know full well what they're doing, and they're trying to protect themselves. Every situation is different, but you need to know that it's going to be okay, and give yourself time. Step away from whatever situation that reminds you of that particular thing and allow yourself to process it without the reminder of what that is. Like, if this is romantic, don't go out. If it's hard to look at other romantic couples because you had a breakup, don't go out. Don't watch romance movies. Like, if that makes it hard for you to not resent them, and then you kind of go through this process again, you get angry, don't subject yourself to that. Do what you need to do to get through the process so that you can come out with healthy clarity. But don't beat yourself up, and don't tell yourself that it's your fault. We need to know that the most important thing you reclaim after manipulation is trust in your own perception. What we should do in times where we're feeling like, I can't trust my own judgment, something must have been wrong with me, that I deserve this, or when you're going through all of the lies and the shock of it, you need to reconnect with people that you can trust, who love you from an unselfish place, from a non-transactional method of love. You need to be with those types of people who can just help you piece together the correct narrative and not just, turn on yourself. They can be with you in each stage of the process. When you're angry, they can be with you when you're grieving. They can, comfort you in a way that's not going to take advantage of you. Another one is going to be that you also need to reevaluate the patterns. You need to see what happened in the pattern of life that you led to get to this. You need to look at each stage of that relationship. It's going to be painful because it's going to require you looking at the mess of what it was, but you need to see what it was going forward so that you have the tools in your tool belt to see it in the future if it shows up in other relationships. And then you also need to rebuild boundaries. In my situation where I ended up in this relationship that was extremely manipulative, I let my guard down to where I had no boundaries. Like, he had full access to anything. I had no in my pocket. It's so weird because, like, even in my marriage, we have boundaries. Boundaries are good. They're healthy. They protect you. They guard your heart. They guard your mind. And they protect the other person. And so in manipulative situations, often there are no boundaries with the person who becomes the victim of manipulation. And so you need to rebuild them. You need to learn what healthy boundaries look like. And often this is going to come through trusted advisors. And as I say in every episode, therapy. You need to be in therapy. You need to learn, like, what does a healthy no look like? How do I build boundaries to protect myself so I don't become resentful towards people? Like, whatever it is that you are walking out of in terms of walking away from manipulation and whatever it was that you were being manipulated about, we need to unlearn some things and we need to learn some new things and rebuild. And a lot of times that's going to involve a therapist or a counselor who has experience with these types of situations and can look at it from, a bird's eye view or an outsider's perspective. And they can also identify the patterns and they can identify, what went wrong and help you. For authority situations, though, this is going to be church, work environments, group settings. You need to prioritize truth over reputation. It is psychologically studied that most people are very trusting with authority because of how we have been programmed to trust authority. There's actually been scientific studies of that. In this scientific study where people just execute whatever command a person gives who is an authority simply because they are programmed to trust authority, no matter what it was that the person was asking them to do. And so in these particular situations, truth is king. And in church, Jesus says the truth will set you free, and he has come to bring truth. I have a very hard time finding the words to say this in a way that doesn't sound like I hate the church, because I don't. I love Jesus and I love his people. However, there are a lot of churches that don't push truth, they push narratives, and it causes people in situations when they're under the leadership of that church to just trust the reputation of the person in authority, and they use language that demonizes independent thinking, because really independent thinking is just seeking after truth. It's not always the case. I'll give you that. It's not always the case with people. Some people independently think and believe lies, but most of the time independent thinking is just an independent pursuit of the truth. But there are people in church settings and group settings and work settings where that is demonized. And so it causes a lot of fear because people don't want to be called heretical. They don't want to be called like a traitor. They don't want to be called names in the name of trying to just like seek out truth. But in church settings, truth is king. Jesus stands for truth. Whatever that truth is, if it paints the church in a bad light, but it's the truth, I don't know how else to say this. Like, truth has to reign. If you're the only person believing that truth, you need to prioritize truth over the reputation of the authority that's spouting a narrative. You also need to step away if accountability doesn't exist. This is happening in, recent scandals when it comes to very big named churches. Like, the lie comes out, and then if accountability isn't walked out, like I mentioned in my previous episode, a lot of people can be very forgiving if accountability is in place. If people walk out reconciliation and they do better going forward, there can be forgiveness. We can continue to coexist. We can continue to be in relationship. But there are a lot of instances where a scandal will come out, or the truth will come out about somebody who's in a position of a church. We'll just use that as an example. And people just like look the other way and they don't say anything and they just pretend it doesn't exist. They make no statement. They continue on business as usual. It doesn't get to work that way. That's not healthy. You cannot have healthy relationships in group settings, in church, interpersonal, whatever, if there's no accountability. If truth comes out and we say, hey, this happened, and they just pretend it didn't happen, it doesn't exist, we don't comment, it's not healthy. So in terms of church, if it comes out that you have people in positions of authority, like the pastors, the staff, the board, whatever, and there's manipulation taking place, and we confront it, and they just don't do anything, we don't take accountability, guys, you need to leave. Get out of that. If you don't want to associate with somebody on a one-on-one basis when they're manipulating and they are not taking accountability and they're lying, they're being deceitful, if you're the type of person that's like, this is just not a healthy friendship, if you're not going to grow and get better and face the truth and you don't want to be in a relationship with that person on a one-on-one scenario, why are we tolerating churches that are doing this? Why are we continuing to attend churches that are not walking out accountability, that are not mirroring the one-on-one scenarios that we want? Why are we tolerating this on like a bigger scale? Healthy leadership welcomes questions. Manipulative leadership punishes them. So that's all I'm going to say on that. So I do want to say something to both sides of the aisle, whether you are somebody who has experienced being manipulated and you're seeing the light, or you're seeing it right now in this podcast, or if you're somebody who is manipulating and lying, or is the type of person to live in fear of abandonment, so you kind of control some things and change the story or whatever. I want to speak to both of you. So to the listeners who may be manipulated, your confusion doesn't mean you're weak. It means you trusted somebody. It means you were vulnerable. And it's normal, because we all want to be deeply loved and deeply accepted and understood. You trusted them to do that. To the listeners who may manipulate unintentionally, self-reflection is where change begins. And you need to think about, what do I want out of my relationships with people? How do I feel when somebody questions something about what I've done? Do I feel the need to cover because I don't want them to leave, or I don't want them to lash out, or I don't want to have an argument or whatever? Like, what are my motivations? In both scenarios, honesty is so important. Being honest with yourself, first and foremost. Like, we cannot be honest with others until we are honest with ourselves. Because often the reason why we so easily lie to other people is because first we've lied to ourselves. And it is so, we all do it. We all lie to ourselves. Oh yeah, this relationship is good. Even though you have really negative feelings about it. Like, no, it's great. I'm fine. I'm doing great. I love when my voice gets higher in pitch. It's like Ross from Friends. I'm fine. I don't know why it's going out all high and squeaky, but I'm fine. No, you're not. You're lying to yourself. And then you're turning around and lying to other people. We need to be honest. We need to be honest with ourselves on the motivation. What do we want from this? How did this happen? And then we need to be accountable. And even in the situations where we are being manipulated, when we defend our manipulators to other people, we need to be accountable for what we did. We need to be accountable for what we tolerated. We need to be accountable for how it transpired. Like, even if you are manipulating, like, I need to be accountable for the fact that I kind of wanted to have my cake and eat it too. I wanted to keep them from knowing the truth so everything could continue business as usual. I wouldn't lose their funding. I wouldn't lose their relationship. I wouldn't lose their respect. They would continue to submit and honor me or whatever. Like, we need to be accountable. We need to own it. And then we need to have the humility to submit to someone else to help us walk out reconciliation, remedying the wrongdoing, remedying our broken hearts, walking through the process of dealing with the pain and rebuilding trust and whatever that looks like. Like, it's kind of the same things that both parties have to have, but it's going to start with being honest about what happened. Manipulation doesn't usually steal your power all at once. It takes it slowly until you start trusting someone else's version of reality more than your own. Manipulation isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle, even disguised as care. Sometimes it's a friend, it's a partner, or a leader twisting reality to protect themselves and leaving you questioning everything. When you discover it all, the pain is very real. The betrayal is deep. The shock is visceral. And yet, there is a way forward. Whether you've been manipulated or you've caught yourself bending the truth to protect your own comfort, you can choose honesty, integrity, and truth. The truth may hurt, as we mentioned last time. It may be extremely uncomfortable, but it's the only path to real intimacy, real trust, and real freedom. You can reclaim your mind, your heart, and your life. And you can rebuild relationships that are rooted in reality, in unconditional love, not lies, not facades. You can have the love in your friendships that you deserve. You can have the love in romantic relationships that you deserve. You can have the belonging in group environments that you deserve. Not the ones that are fake, not the ones that protect other people, that pit them against each other, that make others a villain, that make you a villain. What you'll need to do, though, to find it, is to stand in truth, not for anybody else, but for yourself. Trust your eyes, trust your gut, trust in Jesus, in the truth. Stand for truth. You can move forward after all of this, and you can heal and experience the life that you deeply deserve. Whoever is listening or watching, I want you to know that you're not alone. I want you to know that no matter where it is that you are, if you've even experienced this at all, or you're in the midst of this process of dealing with the PTSD, the trauma, the shock of being manipulated and lied to, of having years of gaslighting that now you're having to carry out and process, that you were right. You had it right, that you weren't wrong, that you had the ability to see it for what it was and you were told not to believe it. Or if you're somebody who is desperately afraid of being truthful, and so you twist and spin and distort, whoever you are, I want you to know that there is a way. There is a way forward. There is a way to have real relationships where you don't have to fear being truthful or honest, where you don't have to fear what you believe and your thoughts. You can have what it is that is out there, where you can be seen and loved and accepted. It is possible to think independently and to have real relationships. We can get there. We can walk each other into better. We can heal all this pain, and being aware of the pain that we carry and the states that we're in when our desires turn into desperation. Our desires are good. Our desire to have love and affection is good. And I do believe that there are the versions of what you crave out there, and it may take time. It may take time to find it. It may take time to get there. It may take time to build those relationships, maybe with people who are already around you, but they're there. Don't lose hope. Don't lose hope just because what you had wasn't what you wanted and what you needed and it wasn't real. Don't lose hope. Don't give up. Keep going. Start with you. Start with loving who you are. Start with getting to know that person. Take your time. Give yourself grace. And know that I love you and that I'm always here. You can leave a comment down below on this video or in this podcast and let me know what you thought of this episode. Or if you are struggling and you want to talk to somebody and you don't want to say it publicly, you can send me an email via the email that I'll leave in the description of this video. And as always, if you want to support the show and you want me to continue doing episodes, make sure that you subscribe, like this video, share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Share it with somebody who may be walking through this and is struggling of how to rectify fact from fiction, and even knowing and trusting themselves and walking that out as well. And know that the life that you are destined to inherit is there waiting for you as you work on you and work on loving you. Thanks so much for listening and for watching. I'll see you very soon.